A system under siege. Pakistan stands at a historic inflection point, gripped by a crisis that goes deeper than currency swings, budget shortfalls, or export shocks. Beneath the headlines, the roots of instability lie in a sprawling web of corruption, weak governance, and regulatory disarray. The latest IMF Governance and Corruption Diagnostic Report, commissioned with the support of Pakistan's government, lays bare the structural weaknesses that have stymied decades of reform and left ordinary citizens paying the price. This is not abstract. Year after year, Pakistan's tax revenue, already one of the lowest in the world compared to GDP, is gutted by exemptions for the wealthy, loopholes carved out for powerful lobbies, and routine evasion protected by a bureaucratic culture of speed money. More than 60% of the economy remains beyond the honest reach of the taxman. Real estate, agriculture, and vast sections of informal business operate in regulatory shadows, their profits untouched by the public purse. The Federal Board of Revenue, charged with collecting the funds that power the state, struggles against chronic understaffing and weak digital infrastructure. Field assessments reveal a system where audits are easily sidestepped if the right hands are greased, where politically connected insiders can settle disputes informally while small businesses face harassment. But it's not only about funds flowing in. Every year, development budgets for health, education, and infrastructure are whittled away, diverted mid-year for debt payments, maintenance bailouts of loss-making state enterprises, or patronage contracts to politically favored firms. The result? Antiquated hospitals, broken classrooms, and crumbling roads, all while ghost projects consume critical resources without ever serving the nation. Nowhere is this more clear than in the energy sector. Subsidies meant to shield consumers from rising tariffs instead support a bloated, loss-making power distribution system. Connections are padded, supplier deals are opaque, and inefficiency is rewarded, not punished. Opaque contracts and political manipulation ensure that well-connected players profit while outages roll over the population. Throughout the diagnostic, the IMF lays out case after case of anti-corruption mechanisms that have failed to live up to their mission. Auditing standards are inconsistent, oversight agencies lack teeth, and whistleblowers face retaliation rather than protection. Promises of reform are made, then quietly rolled back or diluted in the face of political pressure. This landscape of governance isn't just numbers. It's the daily reality affecting Pakistan's ordinary citizens, robbing development, deepening inequality, and eroding public trust. The IMF's report does not mince words. It finds a heavily state-dominated economy operating with fragmented oversight, unreliable enforcement, and a regulatory maze that breeds opportunity for corruption at every level. Pakistan has reached the tipping point where technical fixes will no longer suffice. To break the cycle, the country must confront the nexus between entrenched interests, ineffective institutions, and the absence of consistent accountability. Every citizen knows the cost of this dysfunction. The challenge is whether Pakistan will summon the will to face it head-on. Rigged rules and market barriers. Step into the heart of Pakistan's marketplace, and the same patterns emerge. Opportunity rationed by opaque regulation, competitive enterprise stifled by arbitrary barriers, and economic dynamism lost to a system designed for the few. The IMF report exposes a business climate where playing by the rules rarely guarantees success, unless those rules are pliable for the well-connected. For countless entrepreneurs, navigating Pakistan's regulatory environment is an exercise in frustration. Licensing processes drag on for months, mired in overlapping jurisdictions. From textile mills to tech startups, business owners recount endless paperwork, shifting compliance requirements, and costly inspection regimes that deliver little public value but plenty of openings for illicit payments. At the core, market regulation is fragmented and inconsistent. Agencies claim sweeping powers, yet enforcement is spotty and frequently politicized. The Competition Commission is underfunded and often hamstrung by legal challenges from vested interests. Price controls set at the federal or provincial level are as likely to reflect lobbying as market realities, skewing incentives for farmers, manufacturers, and retailers alike. Public procurement, A sector that should lead by example instead showcases the worst pathologies. Major infrastructure contracts routinely go to favored bidders, with scant transparency in selection criteria. The IMF found that auditing documents for multi-million rupee projects were incomplete or missing in over half the cases studied. For many foreign investors, this unpredictable environment is not just a deterrent, it's a red flag that pushes capital to regional competitors. Informal markets thrive in the vacuum. Across urban centers, unregulated supply chains move goods without oversight, while border regions report routine smuggling that saps legitimate commerce, tax revenue, and industry growth. Enforcement crackdowns, when they come, seem less about protecting the law than about signaling control, and often disproportionately target small traders rather than the orchestrators of more systemic violations. Even sectors that Pakistan touts as competitive reveal deep-seated vulnerabilities. The telecommunications boom is shadowed by regulatory favoritism and delays in spectrum licensing. The agricultural sector, the backbone of millions of livelihoods, faces artificial market distortions. Minimum support prices set for political gain, export quotas altered mid-harvest, and little investment in supply chain modernization. Throughout, the IMF points to a singular reality. Market rules, as designed and enforced, overwhelmingly reward incumbency and compliance with patronage networks. Rather than seeing innovation and fair competition flourish, Pakistan's regulatory ecosystem often ensures that new entrants are forced to navigate informal relationships, extralegal payments, and persistent uncertainty. It is this environment that undermines productivity, constricts formal job creation, and delays much-needed economic transformation. The cost of rigged rules is paid not just in lost investment, but in opportunity squandered, talent discouraged, and growth suppressed. Financial oversight and the roots of vulnerability. The corridors of Pakistan's financial sector, from commercial banks to securities regulators, are meant to be bulwarks against instability, economic crime, and systemic collapse. Yet the IMF report reveals deep fissures, cracks formed by weak oversight, shadowed by corruption, and exploited by those who know how to game the system. Every year, billions flow in and out of Pakistani banks, but the measures intended to track, regulate, and secure these flows struggle under sheer complexity and entrenched interests. External audits, meant to be the backbone of transparency, are routinely delayed or narrowed. Critical findings are quietly redacted or skirted in public summaries. Within banks, the battle against money laundering and terror finance is a work in progress, not a finished edifice. Compliance units are stretched thin, undertrained, and tasked with ticking boxes rather than pursuing genuine investigative leads. Suspicious activity reports, mandated under AML-CFT statutes, are processed slowly and with little coordination across agencies. The result: illicit funds can be moved, often disguised as legitimate transactions, with only sporadic risk of exposure. The IMF cites direct evidence of these vulnerabilities. Between 2022 and 2024, for example, more than $600 million in suspected laundering transactions were reported, yet less than 10% resulted in formal investigations. Of those, only a handful led to meaningful prosecutions. Asset freezes and traceback operations, powerful tools for curbing illicit finance, are rarely activated, often left stuck in bureaucratic review or derailed by high-level intervention. Beyond banks, the securities market offers another avenue for regulatory arbitrage. Insider trading, price manipulation, and concealed ownership structures persist. The Securities and Exchange Commission of Pakistan, despite energetic reform announcements, lacks the independence and resources to pursue large-scale investigations, especially when major shareholders or politically exposed persons are involved. Market volatility is amplified by periods of enforced opacity, undermining investor confidence and the sector's credibility. The financial sector's vulnerabilities are heightened by external pressures. Terror financing risks, a focus of international scrutiny, require constant vigilance and coordination between intelligence, law enforcement, and financial institutions. Yet the IMF finds that agency silos, rivalries, and uneven technological investment have hampered Pakistan's efforts to meet global standards. FATF reviews have yielded partial improvements, but deep structural change remains elusive. Corruption in financial oversight is not just a matter of isolated breaches. The report points to patterns: licensing granted under undisclosed conditions, regulatory forbearance extended to influential borrowers, and soft-touch supervision of institutions linked to political interests. Consequences ripple through the economy, distorting credit allocation, fueling asset bubbles, and leaving honest actors exposed to arbitrary shocks. Lost in the chaos are thousands of small savers and business owners. When a banking institution fails or its solvency is questioned, confidence vanishes overnight. The IMF emphasizes that trust, once broken, is slow to return, and every lapse in oversight or episode of corruption deepens a legacy of suspicion that outlasts any single crisis. Pakistan's financial sector is capable of resilience and innovation, but only if protected from the corrosive effects of regulatory capture, opacity, and patronage-driven supervision. The costs of inaction are clear: greater exposure to global financial volatility, increased risk of economic crime, and a perpetually hobbled engine for growth. Rule of law and the erosion of accountability. On paper, Pakistan boasts a complex legal framework meant to safeguard the public interest, ensure fair justice, and root out corruption. Yet the IMF report reveals a stark contrast between legal ambitions and day-to-day realities, a landscape where the rule of law is often bent by patronage, intimidation, and inertia. In courtrooms across the country, delays are endemic. Cases involving property disputes, commercial contracts, or corruption allegations drag on for years, often outlasting political cycles and the memory of the alleged wrongdoing. The IMF highlights that over 60% of corruption cases reviewed by anti-corruption agencies between 2020 and 2024 remain unresolved, suffocated by endless adjournments, legal technicalities, and bureaucratic hurdles. Ordinary citizens and small businesses, lacking powerful connections, find themselves trapped in a web of slow justice and unpredictable outcomes. Law enforcement, which should operate as an unbiased bulwark against crime, faces its own crises. Recruitment and promotion are riddled with favoritism, provincial influence, and untransparent criteria. In many regions, police units are underfunded, poorly trained, and subject to political intervention. Officers speaking out against internal corruption or illegal orders risk being sidelined, transferred, or worse. High-profile corruption investigations periodically capture headlines, but rarely reach final judgment. The National Accountability Bureau, anti-corruption courts, and provincial watchdogs are hamstrung by limited prosecutorial independence, inconsistent evidence standards, and fears of political backlash. The IMF details cases where investigations against powerful figures were quietly dropped, diluted, or rerouted into procedural loops that guaranteed no meaningful outcome. Access to legal redress is not just slow, it is stratified by status and money. Professional legal counsel is unaffordable for the majority. Poor and marginalized communities rely on overloaded public defenders or informal mediation, with little hope of prevailing against wealthy or influential adversaries. Judicial discretion in sentencing and bail decisions is uneven, often raising questions about fairness and equity. The consequences of weak accountability ripple through society. Deterrence collapses. When high-level fraud, embezzlement, or abuse of office is rarely punished, new offenders see little reason not to try their luck. Trust disintegrates. Citizens grow cynical, doubting that justice is either blind or accessible. Over time, faith in public institutions erodes, replaced by resignation or quiet resentment. Reform stalls. Lawmakers hesitate to pursue aggressive anti-corruption or governance reforms when the legal system itself is viewed as unpredictable or compromised. Despite these steep challenges, the IMF identifies pockets of hope. Some districts have piloted faster case tracking systems, reducing backlogs and introducing transparent audit trails. Legal awareness initiatives and civil society groups push for greater access to justice, transparency, and due process. Yet these efforts remain isolated, often undermined by the broader machinery of political patronage and inertia. In its assessment, the IMF is blunt. Pakistan's struggle with rule of law and accountability is not just a matter of inefficient courts or underfunded police. It is a structural threat, one that feeds corruption, blocks reforms, and weakens the bonds between government and governed. Until this culture is challenged and changed, even the best economic policies risk falling on barren ground. Anti-corruption institutions, promise and paradox. Amid the arduous battle against corruption, Pakistan has assembled an array of institutions meant to function as guardians of integrity and accountability. Yet the IMF report exposes a paradox. While formal mechanisms have multiplied, their real-world impact remains disappointingly limited, often stalling at the intersection of vested interests, resource constraints, and institutional fragmentation. The National Accountability Bureau (NAB) stands as the flagship force, with powers ranging from investigating public sector graft to scrutinizing financial misappropriation. On paper, its mandate is vast. In practice, its independence is often questioned. IMF analysts detail periods where high-profile cases, entangling politicians, bureaucrats, and business tycoons, were derailed by pressure from above. Changes in leadership, revolving prosecutorial priorities, and shifting political winds have led to swings between aggressive pursuit and conspicuous inaction. Other watchdog agencies, from the Federal Investigation Agency, FIA, to provincial anti-corruption establishments, face similar hurdles. Many operate under outdated legal frameworks, with limited manpower and budgets that strain to keep pace with the scale of the challenge. Case management is inconsistent. Records from Karachi, Lahore, and Peshawar highlight years-long investigations that languish for want of forensic capacity, staff training, or judicial coordination. Even at the point of enforcement, weaknesses persist. Asset recovery, a critical component in restoring stolen public funds, has proven elusive. Between 2019 and 2024, less than 15% of assets frozen or identified by anti-corruption authorities were successfully reclaimed, often because proceedings stagnated or external legal assistance was lacking. Attempts to strengthen cross-border cooperation with international agencies have gained some traction. Nonetheless, bureaucratic inertia and limited data sharing continue to slow progress. At the institutional level, fragmentation is a repeating refrain. Oversight bodies are siloed, rarely share intelligence, and often compete for prominence rather than results. Centralized anti-corruption strategies are hampered by poor coordination, duplicative mandates, and patchwork reporting requirements. The IMF cites clear examples where investigations were duplicated, contradictory verdicts issued, and public confusion compounded. Despite these obstacles, there have been flickers of promise. Targeted public awareness campaigns have encouraged whistleblowing and grassroots mobilization against corruption. Some provinces have rolled out digital tracking of procurement and public projects, reducing the risk of ghost contracts and fraudulent spending. Civil society groups, journalists, lawyers, and advocacy coalitions have played increasingly vital roles in exposing abuses and supporting victims. Still, the IMF's assessment is direct. Institutional proliferation is not enough. Sustainable impact demands a shift in culture and execution. For anti-corruption bodies to fulfill their mission, they must enjoy true operational autonomy, protected budgets, and institutional transparency. Reform must prioritize merit-based appointments, technical capacity building, and interagency cooperation, backed by political will that extends beyond slogans. Pakistan's fight against corruption is far from over, but the road forward is mapped in the failures and successes already observed. Only by bridging the gap between intention and action can these institutions begin to reclaim public trust and create space for genuine accountability. The IMF's roadmap, a crossroads for reform. At the conclusion of its diagnostic, the IMF doesn't hesitate. Pakistan faces a stark choice: transform its governance structure and decisively confront corruption, or risk sliding further into economic and social gridlock. The report sets out a strategy that is clear, demanding, and urgent. First, foundational overhaul is non-negotiable. The IMF calls for deep reforms to fiscal governance, starting with broadening the tax base. Agricultural income and real estate, long shielded by powerful lobbies and policy inertia, must be brought into the formal fold. The dominance of indirect taxation, felt hardest by the poor, should give way to progressive levies on wealth and assets, targeting those best able to pay. In public expenditure, transparency must be restored from top to bottom. All government contracts and procurement should be digitized and publicly disclosed, with audits independently overseen outside the political chain of command. Development funds, especially for health, education, and infrastructure, are to be protected from mid-year reallocations and patronage-based spending. When it comes to market regulation, the imperative is to dismantle old networks. Licensing, permitting, and compliance must be streamlined, with single-window systems replacing maze-like bureaucracy. Agencies need coherent mandates, and regulatory capture by incumbent interests must be prosecuted, not tolerated. The business climate should reward innovation and fair competition, not connections or unofficial payments. For the financial sector, rapid investment in technology and skills is paramount. AML-CFT regimes need robust implementation, with intelligence shared across agencies and cases monitored to completion, not buried by complexity or interference. Banks and securities markets require modern oversight, clear penalties, and true independence for regulators tasked with defending integrity. On the rule of law, speed and fairness must become universal. Case backlogs should be prioritized for clearing, and judicial appointments shielded from political pressure. Legal aid must be expanded for vulnerable groups. ND police reform, recruitment, accountability training must be enforced, not shelved. Anti-corruption bodies must move beyond the paradox of proliferation. The IMF recommends merging or tightly coordinating oversight agencies, establishing common data standards, and guaranteeing protected funding. Asset recovery should be subject to time-bound targets, and whistleblower protections made real, not just rhetorical. Perhaps above all, public involvement is vital. Civil society must be empowered through freedom of information, legal protection for investigative reporting, and a renewed commitment to civic education. Reform is not crafted by technocrats alone. It demands engagement from every level of society. The IMF is candid. The window is narrowing. With each delay, Pakistan risks further capital flight, rising debt, and social unrest. But the report also insists that the tools for renewal exist. Other nations have trodden this path, sometimes slowly, often painfully, but with clear vision and persistent courage. Pakistan's crossroads is real and immediate. It faces not only administrative choices, but existential ones. How the country responds to the IMF's roadmap will decide whether it can outgrow the burdens of corruption and reclaim a future for its citizens, one built on fairness, trust, and sustained progress. The verdict will not be written in committee rooms, but in the lives of millions who await delivery on decades-old promises.